talk about world building, and specifically world building using Notion. First of all, a bit of context. I am currently working on my plot bunny idea, Project Snowstorm, which is loosely inspired by pre-revolutionary France and in general has a whole monarchy system that I'm doing a lot of research for right now. It's definitely high fantasy, so I need to do a lot of world building before I dive into it, and at least that's how I prefer to work. If I'm gonna have a whole new world that my novel is set in, I need to know what that world is. I'm currently using and reading volume 2 of On Writing and World Building, as it has a few chapters that interest me, such as world histories, monarchies, class, wealth and power, how class systems are maintained, how they collapse, etc. I've also bought several books, including one on my Kindle called The Habsburgs, The Rise and Fall of a World Power, which is this book. And I have bought a book about the Sun King by Nancy Mitford, which is this one. And a book called House of Lilies by Justine Fernhaber Baker, which is this one. And the subtitle of this one is The Dynasty That Made Medieval France. This one talks more about the Capetians, which is technically before pre-revolutionary France, but it is of interest to me more in terms of them being a full-on dynasty, and I just want to sort of learn about dynasties and big families that used to reign over Europe. So that's for your context. Now this is going to be potentially a series of videos, and I think this first one we're just going to focus on setting things up in Notion. So you might be new to Notion, or you might know of it, have explored it a little bit, but you might feel that it's a bit daunting, especially when you see some of those templates and the way that they're made up. But don't worry, we're going to take it step by step. And I don't use Notion in a very fancy way. I think I use it in a very practical way, which is how I think it should be used. You can definitely make up or download really, really pretty templates if that's your jam. But to me, that's the equivalent of people who do beautiful bullet journaling pages. When I try to do that and take inspiration from them, I end up not using them. They become more a piece of art than actually functional. So we're gonna see Notion from a functional point of view today. You can quickly see that I've opened it in two ways. First of all, I have the browser version, and I also have the app version. I'm creating a new account with another email address just so that we can do this all together. So the first thing that happens when I do that is an onboarding page appears. I'm gonna click for personal use and click continue. What's on your mind? You can select, I think, these, and they might suggest to you some free templates to use to start from, but I'm just gonna skip for now. So there's a bit of onboarding, there's a getting started checklist. You can click it on and off whenever you're doing any of these if you want to follow it. And I guess it's given me a monthly budget as a starting template and a weekly to-do list. I don't need any of those, so I'm just gonna delete these. Move to trash. Right, so there is a home page, which is something quite new, and you can add a new page from there. And you don't really need to worry too much about the rest unless you want to click on any of these, which are a way to learn. So there are some sessions to help you figure Notion out. And I think you can connect it to Google Calendar as well if you want to use Notion that way. But all we're trying to do right now is build a story Bible, a world building Bible. So we're going to add a page, and you can see here from my own personal Notion, what I have is this page, which has multiple sub pages. And that's how Notion works. Is pages within pages within pages, and that's the beauty of it. It's building blocks. Let's just name this page Story Bibles, and this would then become the page where I could store all of the different story Bibles that I make up for different books, for different book series, etc. I'm just gonna start with an empty page, and what you can do, and I like to do this when this is more of a setup for several sub pages, you can make it full width. So suddenly this page will take more space. The first thing I want to do is just add a little icon, because when you see your different pages, you'll see the icon as well. So you can go in emojis and just choose, for instance, a book emoji, or you can go in the icons here and do the same thing, and they're flat icons that you can choose the color of. So I could do this and be like orange. You can also do custom icons, and you can just paste an image link or upload a file yourself. And then the other thing you can do as well, which I like to do when we're talking about a bigger page holding multiple pages, is to add a cover. This is what a cover looks like. That's all it does. It's just decorative. So I'm going to add a cover, and you click change cover here, and what you have is an initial gallery of free imageries and where they're from. For instance, from the Met Museum you have these Japanese prints, but you can also upload an image yourself, link to something online. You gotta keep in mind that this might disappear, or use Unsplash, which is a copyright free image website full of stock imagery. So I'll pick something from Unsplash, and I'm gonna search for library, for instance. I like this one, which is quite dark. Now that I have this initial setup, here's how I like to work personally my different books. I like to classify them by order in which a book goes and evolves. So I have book ideas, outlining, drafting, revisions, and querying. And at the top, I also have a book idea gallery where I keep track of any notes I suddenly have in my head of a new book idea. I also have some writing goals from 2023, but essentially the story Bibles are these at the bottom. And each of these is a page. So I'm gonna start this new setup and do the exact same because that's something I like, but you don't have to work it that way. You don't even have to have an order, you can just plop a page in. So on Notion, the way to work anything is to use the backslash. So if I press backslash, it gives you the basic blocks. So you have text, page, which is the one you'll use most often to create a new page. To-do list, I use that a lot. And then you have your heading sizes. You have a table, you have a bulleted list, a numbered one, a toggle list, which is when you have a little arrow, you can close it and everything is hidden. You can open it and you see the list underneath. You have a way to do a quote, a divider, which is just a line. You can link to a page that exists, and you can do a little call out, which I also like to do. You can upload an image, a video, some audio, etc. And then you also have your databases. You also have columns of text, etc. Essentially, you have a bunch of things you can easily explore. But let's just have a look for now at my headings. I'm gonna do heading 1, and this will be my building blocks to separate my sections. So this one will be ideas. And to make it look slightly nicer, I'm just gonna click these little 6 dots on the left of it, and I will select color. And in color, you can change the color of the text, and you can change the color of the background, which is how you highlight it. So for instance, here I will do orange, and this is my ideas. You can see that it's taking the full length, and that's how you write. So if I do text, I can just start typing, and everything goes in order. If I do a plus, that will automatically give me a list item, and I can do, here's a list, etc. I am going to create one little bit of space so that my highlight block looks a little bit nicer. And I think it's quite big. This was actually heading 2 instead of 1. Yes, I think that looks nicer. So that's what I'll do here as well. So if you've already set up your text in a certain way, you just re-click these 3 little buttons, and you can do turn into and change it to anything else. So I'll change it to heading 2. It keeps the same formatting I've already put in there, aka the color background. Now I can just click Option and drag, put it down and release it, and suddenly I've copied it. So I don't have to do this again if I don't want to. It's a copy of this one exactly. And then my second title would be outlining. And I think I will change my ID's color to yellow. So you can easily drag this, move it around. So that's what I'm gonna do, and I'm gonna put it on the right of it. And now suddenly I have 2 columns of text. Now the main thing to know is that this, as you can see when I select it, takes the full length of the page. So if I want to use it only underneath ideas, so this space, which is nothing, I've not used the space to create a page or text or bullet list or anything yet, but this space that I'm about to use, I can drag it and pull it right underneath ideas, and suddenly I will have a column that starts underneath ideas. And I can do the same with this one underneath outlining, and suddenly I have 2 columns. There you go. So let's create our first story world building Bible. Under ideas, I'm gonna do / and create a new page. You automatically open up into this new page that you've just set up when you create a new page. So this one is currently untitled, but you can see here at the top that it sits underneath Story Bibles. We're going to call it Project Snowstorm, and we're going to add an icon. So I think it was a crown. Yeah, it's this one, and I like it in white because it gives us this idea of snow. Cool. So now if I go back to my Story Bibles, you can see Project Snowstorm sits underneath here. If I want to see more of everything, you can see I can just open this up a little bit and you can suddenly read everything better. So the way that I set up my Story Bibles, let's have a look at the one that is actually properly set up, is Space Princess Project. So I'll click on Space Princess Project and you can see I've also added in, there's a page here, which was actually all of my original thoughts that I started with for Space Princess Project before I build up this story Bible for it. And then I've got my prepping, my writing, and my revising. So in my prepping, I have resources, world building, character, outline notes, and then notes for book 2. In my writing, I have a timeline, notes while writing, things to include, and small fixes. You can see here, next to include, there is this little page icon. It's because I've not set up an actual icon. So that's what will happen if you don't on your page. It'll just look like this. And if I look at, for instance, Lockhart and Beckett, I had essentially just set up plotting and revisions. So in my plotting, I had character profiles, which I don't think I used actually. I have a world building section, an outline section, and a timeline section, and then I have some revision notes that I'm currently using. But you don't have to set up each book the same way, is my point. So now that I've set up a new page for Project Snowstorm, keep in mind you can move things around. I could be like, I'm done with it as an idea, it's now in the outlining phase, and I can just move this page, and everything inside of the page moves with it, obviously. So I can also just do Ctrl-Z and get it back to where it was before. You can also see that my pages that appear on the left here, it's just this main big one. It's Story Bibles. It's not this secondary page. But if I hover over it, there's an arrow, I can click it down, and suddenly I can see my drop-down menu with the items I have in it. So let's go to Project Snowstorm. The way that I started setting it up in my main Notion is by having 3 sections: prepping, writing, and revising. And then in my world building, which is where we'll do the bulk of things, I started setting it up using these gallery sections. To look at another example of something that I've done a little bit further, Space Princess Project, in the world building section, you can see as a gallery view all of the elements that I worked on. So I've got a page on the houses, spaceships, history and politics, psychology of space travel, locations, religions, entertainment and media, and then a specific page on vocabulary and details. And if I go, for instance, in spaceships, it opens up like this as a little panel, and you can see all the things that I have started looking at, such as what spaceships look like, their types. This is a toggle list, so I can click it shut or open, and I can see everything that's in there, or keep it clean if I want to, which I quite like. And here on the right, you also have a little menu that appears just because I've set them up as actual headings. So if I hover over it, I can then go down directly to naming conventions, which is this heading there. So in our new page, we've set it up as Project Snowstorm. I'm gonna add a cover. Let's change the cover, and I'm gonna go to Unsplash, and I can't remember if it's Versailles or something else, or even just this ceiling is quite impressive. You can reposition your cover as well. You can drag the image, move it up and down so that it sits better. And I'm gonna do the same thing here as earlier. I'm gonna make this into a full width page. And then what you can also do is make it serif font, which I sometimes quite like. It gives just a different impression. I'm just going to set this up as an empty page once again. So in this page, what I had initially was prepping, writing, and revising. So we'll do the same here. Heading 2, I think is a nice size. And I'm gonna name it 1, prepping. And we're gonna click this, make the color a yellow, leave a bit of space here. And what I can do as well is change the color of the text. So if I do this, I have to select the text specifically and then go in this menu, text color there, and click on yellow, and now I have yellow on yellow. I'm gonna do drag an option and name this one 2. And then I'll do this thing again where I move them next to each other to create columns. There we go. Okay, let's get into the thick of it. Now that we have set up everything else that we need, we're gonna start by setting up our world building page. And you can now start seeing how these pages are embedded within each other, and you can easily find the start of it. So you have here your story Bible, Project Snowstorm, Untitled at the moment. And I can see that when I click on this, it is currently sitting underneath all those columns. So I can drag it, here we go, and put it right underneath prepping. So this is gonna be world building. I'm gonna do the same thing as I usually do and add an icon, and I tend to like a globe. Oops, a globe for world building, like this for instance. And once again, I'll make it as a full width page. And since we started doing serif, I'll do a serif one as well here. And you can see how I had initially set this up here. So you can see I have all of these images coming in, and that it creates different sections. So I have the rifts, history, locations, etc. So I think we're gonna start by doing gallery view, and you can see there's some pre-composed items, pre-made blocks for you, which are 3 pages. And one of the pages has a little to-do list inside of it. You have a space here for a title, it's currently called Untitled, and you have the name Gallery View. I'm gonna click on this name and do rename, and I'm gonna name, instead of Gallery View, I'll name this The Rift. And that is because I have 3 sections here, which are the rift, which is sort of my element X of my story. There's a dimensional rift that leads to a hell dimension, and that is how monsters are coming out from this hell dimension and coming into this current fantasy world. You could name this anything. So for instance, I could say, instead of the rift, this could be about politics, right? And here I can also name it if I want to, if you'd rather have a bigger header. So I can click here, these 3 dots, and I can do hide database title, so that it's a little bit cleaner as a view, and that's what I prefer to do. But if you click back here, these 3 dots, top right, if you click on the type of layout that we're using, where it says gallery, I click on this, you can change it if you wanted to. We're gonna keep it as a gallery because that is what looks nice. And you can select show database title and it will come back. There's also this option here that says open pages in center peak. And that's what I showed you earlier with the Space Princess example. So if I click on here, I can change that and say it's a side peak or it's a full page, which means it'll just open as this current page and you'll just see it embedded in the list of pages. Or side peak is just a little panel on the right that comes up on top of the page that you're on. I like this center peak thing, and it's a default for the gallery system, so I'm going to keep it. But you can change all of these properties as much as you want. I can also change my card sizes. I could make them small if I want to, or I can make them large and make them a lot bigger on the page. I'm just going to leave them as medium, and I'm going to hide the database title again. So each of these pages can become an element of your world building. That's how we're going to see them. So page 1, if I click on it, it's set up currently as this little to-do list, so I can just select everything and delete it. And what do we have here? I started with power and politics, and it's currently empty, and then I have something about the monsters. Let's call this one power and politics. And I think I have an icon, which, what was it? It's the little crown again, so I can just reuse this, the chess king, and make it blue. If you add a cover here, it does not appear here. So remove, there we go. So the way that you're gonna wanna get an image here, if I start typing text, for instance, this is the thing that you see immediately, is what's inside of your card. So instead of that, the best thing you can do, image, click on this, and then I'm going to go to Unsplash. That'll do. So we have this really big image. I can reduce the size of it so it doesn't bother me so much within the page if I do this. And even if I've done this, it still appears full size here. So then I have another one with monsters. So let's rename this monsters. And for this, I have some mood boarding that I started doing for Project Snowstorm, so I can upload a file. There we go. And now this appears there. Now I want to create a new section. So I'm going to do gallery view, and I'm going to do the same thing. So this is starting to take shape. What I would do next is start filling these in. So once I have a bunch of them and I have all the ones I need, I would then go in and say, for instance, what have I been looking at? I've started reading from On Writing and World Building, the second volume, and I'm currently in the part about monarchies, and it's asking me a lot of questions about how to set up my monarchy. So I think I would probably use this as my basis. Having read some of this chapter, I have written down some ideas about the system for my monarchy. So I might go into this section in History and Politics. I'll set up a new page and I will call it Monarchy System. So the title of this section is Types of Monarchy, so I would probably start with the same title and do heading, toggle heading, for instance 2, and I would call it Type of Monarchy. I click here in this empty toggle, click or drop blocks inside, I can click here and then suddenly I'm inside the toggle. You can see that the arrow is pointing down. Again, I can make it, you know, a certain color, but because I'm in a toggle, it will either I need to click specifically on the text if I only want to color this part of the text and change it here. So I can do, say for instance, yellow, and it will just highlight this. I can create a bit of space. Or if I selected everything and did yellow, it colors the entire block where my text is going to appear. So for instance, like this, right? So if I close it, it closes the block. If I click the arrow, it opens the block. I'd rather just keep it quite simple. I'll just do default background and I'll make this yellow. There we go. And I'll just use a bulleting system for now. So I'll do plus and that will automatically give me a bullet list. Mix of succession and elective. And I want to explain that, so I can go to the line, and if I click on tab, it will move this bullet list to become a secondary bullet list to the first one. So I can say it's a rotation of 6 families who get an emperor elected from their house or family, each one after the other. And my male main character, Valois, his family decided to retire themselves from the opportunity to get the title out of the rotation. And then I made a note. The emperor hoped to marry the princess. The emperor hoped to marry the princess to Valois. And then this is a note that is not specifically related to how the monarchy works, but to the story itself. So I might change it and I'll click on these 6 dots and I'll do turn into, and I like to use a call out every now and then. And a call out does this. So it's suddenly highlighted in a little box, which you can change the color of. So I'll change the color to yellow because that's sort of this section. And you can change the icon as well. So I will also change the icon to maybe the fleur-de-lis, for instance, in yellow. And that's like a little note within this. Because this is inside of this bulleted list and this toggle title, I can click the toggle title, it'll close it, and suddenly the rest of my page is free. So then I can create a new one and say toggle heading 2, and I'll do who gets to elect the emperor. And I'll also make this into a yellow color. And so when I click on it, I suddenly have these 2 things, right? and this becomes my secondary item. If I want to separate these two a little bit more, I'll also create a divider, for instance, and I can move that in between the two sections. So here my divider sits underneath type of monarchy, or I can move it before, for instance, and say this is the start of the section under this picture. This is just a bit of aesthetic. So then for this one, I have the fact that I'll just do another bullet list, and I'll do each family of the court gets 1 vote, and then each of the 7 to become an elective. You need a noble title. The title and medal are given by a signed petition, which needs to be signed by all 7. I have another type of note that is specific to the story, so I'll do another call out. And oh, it moved inside of the list, so I'll just move it here so that it's proper. And you can see that it's repeated the formatting that I used last. And I'll say Valois, therefore, still has to go to court and gets pestered by bourgeois families needing his signature. So I'm gonna stop here for this session, and I feel like that's already a lot. It's already going to be a bit of a long video of me explaining those things, but essentially, as you can see, we've set up the start of a world building Bible into Notion. From there, you can sort of go wherever you want, and you might not need me anymore. But if you are interested in seeing more of the process, I will be doing a part 2 of this video, where I will be going through more of me reading through some of these books, including these history books, and how I take information from that to help me do my world building, how I sort of work through some of the information I find, what sort of inspiration I get from these, and how it builds up slowly into a full world building. But I think for now, that's plenty of information already. If you have any questions about how Notion works, or anything that I did in this video that I did not explain properly, do leave me a comment down below and ask me, because I will try to respond as best as I can. Or if I can't in written form, I will integrate my response into the next video in part 2. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like, leave a comment, and if you're hoping to catch part 2 of this, consider subscribing to my channel, ring that bell, all that jazz, and I will see you guys in the next one.